Let's talk to Cormac Smith, former strategic communications advisor to Pavlo Klimkin when he was Ukraine's foreign minister until a couple of years ago. Cormac, good to have you back on the programme. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just talk us through, if you would. I want to start with something that actually I think has been underreported here, and that is just what the situation is in Ukraine right now. What is the state of the conflict? Good evening to you.
Good evening, Ben, and thank you, as I said. Look, can I just start very, very quickly by answering your question? Can Ukraine win? Yes, absolutely they can, if we give them the support that they need.
We'll come on to that. We'll come on to that.
We will.
We'll come on to that in just a moment. I just wanted to get a sense, first of all, of is Ukraine winning right now, or has Russia got the upper hand?
I don't think either side has the upper hand at the moment. From all reports I hear, the Ukrainians are starting to run short of artillery ammunition and anti-aircraft ammunition and so forth, and this is impacting on how they plan their battle strategies. It's certainly the case, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, that the Russians are taking huge casualties, but we've heard reports already that the Ukrainians are being forced to switch from attack to defense in certain areas. Obviously, I'm not a military man, but the military men will tell you that to go on the attack, you need far greater numbers and forces than to simply defend a position. It's harder to attack than it is to defend. So it is difficult for Ukraine at the moment. And of course, they're heading into winter as well.
And just to be clear, Cormac, you're saying that is a direct consequence, a direct result of the West's support effectively drying up?
It's a result of two things. We have, if I could just remind people, almost 2 years ago, nearly 2 months before the war began, the then Defence Minister, Oleksiy Reznikov, said, "We do not expect your boots on the ground. Just give us the weapons we need and we will do our own fighting." Now, while we have armed Ukraine to a very significant extent, we have never given them all of the weapons which they told us they needed, not just to stay in the fight, but to deliver a knockout blow and drive Russia back to the 1991 borders. Critically, we expected Ukraine to go on an offensive earlier on in the summer without the facilities that any NATO country since 1945 would simply not do, i.e. to go on a major offensive without air cover. The Ukrainians remain outnumbered in the air by roughly 10-1, and that's because the modern fighter jets, the F-16s, that they have been begging for certainly 15 to 18 months, we have still not delivered to them. That's the first point. But the second point, which is compounding that, is the political shenanigans that we have had earlier this week in the EU with Putin's stooge, Viktor Orban, effectively blocking 50 million euros of EU aid. But also we know that the right wing of the GOP in the United States and the Speaker, Michael Johnson in particular, have also blocked a similar size aid package of around $50 million from the US at the most critical time. So what I'm saying is, one, while we have armed Ukraine, we haven't given them enough, and critically, we haven't given them the long-range artillery and the fighter jets that they really need to deliver the knockout blow. And now, at this critical stage of the war, I think we risk snatching defeat from the jaws of victory by holding back this absolutely critical aid to Ukraine.
And, we've had the argument about fighter jets. People have different views on that, but I read, Cormac, that the Ukraine is now running out of artillery shells. I mean, even the sort of far more basic types of weapons that are a staple of any conflict like this, they don't have enough of. I mean, people do say, and you've heard the argument, well, we've done what we can. We can't keep doing this. Ukraine cannot win this war. We should be encouraging them to negotiate with Putin. What makes you so confident that Ukrainians can win this?
Ukraine can win this war if we give them the weapons that they need. They have confounded Western expectations from the very beginning. If I could remind listeners, there were many expected that Kyiv would fall within 72 hours. The Ukrainians eventually won the battle for Kyiv and drove the Russians back significantly. They have this year taken back about a half of the land that Russia took, but they have told us very clearly what they need. They have shown us how effectively they can fight. And the things that they need are the long-range artillery, which Britain has done a huge amount to give with the Storm Shadow earlier on this year. But they're still looking for Taurus from Germany and from the longer-range ATACMS from the United States. These are absolutely critical to interdict the Russian supply lines far behind the front line. And again, the military men are telling us that this is what they need, but also the fact that we still haven't given them the fighter jets. So, in my opinion, and listening to the people that I listen to and knowing the Ukrainians how I do, I have no doubt that they can win, but only if we give them the support that they desperately need.
How long do you think that might take, Com? Are we talking about supporting the Ukrainians for potentially decades to come? This is not going to be over. It's not going to be resolved quickly, even with fighter jets.
Well, I can't put a figure on that. I certainly don't believe it's decades. But if we were to give Ukraine, my belief, and speaking to the people that I speak to, I believe that if we had given Ukraine the heavy weapon systems, and they're the battle tanks in sufficient numbers, the aircraft and the longer range artillery, as I've said, if we had given them these over 15 months ago, when they were crying out for them, this war could well be over already. It does seem like we've been willing to give Ukraine enough to keep them in the fight, but it's almost that we're afraid of seeing Russia defeated. And the one thing that I would offer, the one thing that I would add in, and you alluded very much to it before I came on, Ben, was this is a wolf that will come to our door. And I learned this very clearly when I was out there between 2016 and 2018, working for the foreign minister and other people in the government. Putin is absolutely hell-bent on putting the old Russian Empire together. Again, he is banking on the Western allies tiring. If he does win in Ukraine, which first will be a genocidal catastrophe for over 40 million people, the Baltics and countries like Poland and Finland are next. Don't take my word for it. Speak to people as I have, and military and politicians in those states who have been very, very clear about what will happen if we don't enable, collectively, if we don't enable Ukraine to defeat Russia and drive Russia back to the 1991 borders. There is no doubt about it. The wolf will come to our door.
And this is the test case, really. Cormac, great to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming back on the programme. That's Cormac Smith, former strategic communications advisor to Pavlo Klimkin when he was Ukraine's foreign affairs minister up until 2019. Cormac making a pretty compelling, I thought, pretty impassioned case for why Western support continues. That point at the end as well. This is our fight too. This affects us. And he said, we've come this far. We've already committed billions. Surely it makes sense, it does to me, to give Ukraine what it needs to see this through. Otherwise,